Today on BRStv Investigates, will this $30 narrow lens reflector completely change the way you mount your lights? Can it open doors to higher mounting heights, more concentrated par numbers, or even better performance at deeper depths? More specifically, can we intentionally change an ultra-wide flood lamp performance of the Kessil A360X into a narrow-angle spotlight to better match different tools for different jobs? Those answers are coming up. Hi, I'm Randy with this Friday's BRStv Investigates, where we put popular reefing gear, theories, and methods to the test by experimenting on our own tanks so you don't have to experiment on yours. And last week, we answered if changing our light's lens design can change its optimal mounting height, and learned that by using very specialized lenses, we can achieve some pretty extreme mounting heights off the tops of our tanks. But today we're unpacking that question a little further to show you exactly what the $30 55-degree Kessil A360X Narrow Reflector does to the 130-degree A360X wide-angle lens, and see what performances you can gain and who would benefit the most from changing the A360X wide-angle floodlight into a reef tank spotlight. To do that, we test 3 questions today, all of which you'll see earn our first 10 out of 10 Reef Certainty clean sweep across the board by answering 1, using the narrow reflector attachment, are we able to effectively raise the ideal mounting height of the Kessil A360X up from the optimal 8 inches we found in previous testing? And if so, will it maintain similar spread and par performance? 10 out of 10 Reef Certainty. Question 2, will a 75-degree reduction in the Kessil's beam angle from 130 degrees to 55 degrees focus the par intensity in a smaller area for those who need higher par in spaces smaller than our 24 by 24 inch test tank? Again, 10 out of 10 Reef Certainty. And that third question, will the narrower 55-degree lens allow reefers to penetrate the light deeper into the tank, where maintaining higher par is harder to do? That one too gets a 10 out of 10 Reef Certainty, but beyond confirming these answers, today we'll show you how Kessil is one of the very few, if not one of the only reef lights that we've tested that has the ability to adjust its ideal mounting height to meet your needs, whereas most others fall somewhere in that one-size-fits-all category. So not every reefer has the ability to, or even desires to, mount their lights at the same height across the board, and if we're being honest, the phrase one-size-fits-all doesn't really hold up in the reefing hobby. So even though our light testing criteria found lighting options like the Kessil A360X to have an optimal mounting height of just 8 inches off the water in a 24-inch area, where does that leave other reefers who want to use those to light tanks that are larger, smaller, deeper, or completely unique other situations? Can changing the dynamics of the same light help us turn it into the right tool for our specific job? Let's find that out today by answering those 3 earlier questions, which we plan to do by first determining the new optimal mounting height of the Kessil A360X using the narrow reflector attachment by raising the light inch by inch until we reach a 15% loss of efficiency or light spill, and then compare those results to what we found for the A360X 130-degree lens fresh out of the box. Then, in order to answer question 2, we'll look at the data for both configurations mounted at 8 inches above the water with and without the narrow reflector, and compare the average par in the center, middle, and outer rings just below the water surface at 6 inches deep in the tank to see the differences in par intensity across the 24-inch testing area. And to test the par penetration depth question, we'll compare the par data and spread for both focused and wide-angle A360X lens at 18 inches deep in our test tank. Starting with the optimal mounting height test of the A360X Narrow Reflector, remember, we're looking for a mounting height that spreads the par as evenly as possible across a 24-inch by 24-inch area until we reach a point where the total average par is no more than 15% of the total average par from the start, meaning a 15% threshold for light efficiency shining outside of the tank. For this test, we start with the A360X with narrow 55-degree reflector mounted at just 6 inches off the water, and then raise the light up inch by inch, testing par in a grid of 36 data points at 6 inches deep in the tank. What that looks like for the start of the test, 6 inches off the water, is a super focused beam of light entering the tank with a total average PAR of 157 and a 617 PAR center 4-inch grid that rapidly falls off out towards the edges with an average 49 PAR in the outer ring. That's a 568 average PAR difference in between the center and outer edges, with the A360X's beam angle being focused down from 130 to 55 degrees. And to put that into perspective from our previous testing without the narrow reflector, at the same 6-inch mounting height using the 130-degree lens, that center to outer PAR ring difference was only 160 PAR. This type of performance at 6 inches already shows how a change in focus of 75 degrees to the beam angle also changes what's normally a wider angle floodlight into a pretty intense spotlight. From what we've learned over the past few months of testing lights with similar spotlight qualities is that in order for them to achieve ideal spread and distribution in a 24-inch area, they need to be mounted significantly higher. So in that spirit, we continue to test the narrow lens reflector inch by inch, looking for that optimal mounting height. We found that BRS recommended optimal mounting height to be right at 13 inches off the top of the water, or 5 inches higher than the Kessil A360X without the narrow reflector. Comparing the wider angle A360X at 8 inches versus the A360X with narrow reflector at 13 inches, we see the 130-degree A360X on the left and A360X narrow beam on the right, both showing total average PAR numbers within just 2 PAR, or 131 versus 129 respectively, yet distributed differently. The wider angle lens distributes the light more evenly, whereas the narrow angle lens allows you to achieve nearly similar results, yet 5 inches higher off the water. So looking at that nearly identical total average PAR between the two, we've effectively changed the Kessil A360X from the right tool for the job at 8 inches into the right tool for the job at 13 inches. Driving this point home even further, for those of you considering mounting the 130-degree lens higher than our recommended 8 inches above the water, we tested that super wide angle lens at the same 13-inch mounting height and found over a 32% loss of efficiency because so much more light is spilling outside of the 24-inch testing area, whereas the narrower beam maintains over 85% of the light inside that same area, but does so again 5 inches higher off the water. Because of these results, I'm going to jump straight into rating the first of our 3 questions today, a 10 out of 10 Reef Certainty that we absolutely can change the optimal mounting height of our lights and maintain similar performance by focusing the lens to a tighter beam angle. Not every reef lighting solution has the ability to do this, so kudos to Kessil for taking the knowledge that they've gained from their sister brand Felix and the stage lighting industry and turning that knowledge into an opportunity for us reefers to have more control over customizing our reef lighting into solutions that are more tailorable to something that meets our needs. But we aren't done yet. We still have 2 more questions that need to be answered, so let's move on to that second question and find out if narrowing the beam angle will allow us to achieve higher PAR in those smaller areas. For example, those reefers trying to light areas smaller than 24 by 24 inches, but don't want a ton of light spill outside of their tank, or for reefers with unique lighting needs for spotlight higher PAR inside the tank. As you might have guessed, answering this question is as simple as comparing the 130-degree wide-angle lens versus the narrower 55-degree at the same 8-inch mounting height off the top of the water in our 24-inch area. Looking at both beam angles side by side, it's plain to see that indeed, the 55-degree narrow reflector focuses more light into a tighter area with 268 more PAR concentrated in the center. However, the 130-degree lens spreads the light out further towards the outer edges with a 32 PAR higher average in the outer ring, right near the edges of the tank. This narrowing of the beam to accomplish higher PAR in a smaller area is also demonstrated in the differences in total average PAR, with the A360X wide angle at 129 and the A360X narrow angle at 153, meaning that in a 24-inch area, the narrow beam retains more average PAR inside the tank rather than spilling into the surrounding room. This is also something you can see with the naked eye, where unlike almost all other LEDs out there, with the narrower lens reflector attached, not only does it keep light spillage to a minimum, but it's also not blinding you from a sitting position at these higher mounting heights. However, the performance of a narrow beam angle does come at the cost of creating a spotlight hotspot directly under the light, which is fine for those reefers looking to increase par in a tighter area, but probably more useful to other reefers who are lighting a smaller tank where the 130-degree lens just might be too wide for the smaller tank footprint, earning this second question another 10 out of 10 Reef Certainty. Now let's see the differences in par penetration when we couple the A360X with that 55-degree narrow lens, starting with both mounted at 8 inches off the water and testing a grid of par measurements 18 inches deep in our 24-inch cube. With the 130-degree lens on the left, there's an ultra-flat distribution of 97, 99, and 96 par in the center, middle, and outer ring, providing the entire area an overall average par of 97, while the narrower 55-degree lens reflector on the right is nearly double that in the center at 184 and has almost 30 more par total average at the same 18 inches deep in the tank. Thinking back to both lens performances near the top of the tank when mounted at 8 inches, the drop in overall average par at 6 inches deep to 18 inches deep is relatively close, where the 130-degree lens falls by an average par of 32 and the 55-degree lens drops by 25 average par 12 inches deeper in the tank. Following the scale of average par drop-off in tanks deeper than 24 inches, I'd expect to see similar results, but with the narrow reflector here obviously upwards of 24% higher par at 18 inches deep. Yet, does the same hold true for higher mounting heights of 13 inches? We mount the light 13 inches off the water and see a pretty similar performance where the 130-degree lens had an overall average par of 87 in the top 6 inches of the tank, but at 18 inches deep in the tank only averages 65 par. While the 55-degree narrow reflector averaged 131 in the top 6 inches and 106 near the bottom, meaning 38% more par in the bottom of a 24-inch tall tank at this higher 13-inch mounting height. So this gives us our third 10 out of 10 Reef Certainty for today's 3 questions. Most certainly, if you narrow the beam angle, you can maintain higher par numbers deeper in the tank using a spotlight over a wide-angle floodlight. My biggest takeaway from today's testing results comes straight from that message that you hear Ryan and I say all the time, which is the importance of matching the right tool for the right job. I wouldn't use a hammer when I needed to tighten a screw, and in that same frame of mind, I wouldn't use a wide-angle floodlight when I need a spotlight and the higher mounting height opportunities that come with it. I will say again that this Kessil A360X is the only light that we've tested on BRStv Investigates that has an adjustable ideal mounting height to match different reefers' needs, giving you a range of options from 8 to 13 inches off the tank, whereas all others have more fixed optimal mounting heights. However, ideal mounting height is only 1/3 of the equation for mastering any reef lighting option, whether it's this Kessil A360X, another LED module brand, T5 lights alone, or really anything you choose to put over the top of your tank. To learn what those other 2/3 of mastering reef tank lighting equation are, the answer is in this playlist right over here.